Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Supply Side West 2023. Sometimes I forget what year we're in a time warp. I'm Fran Schoenwetter. I work with Supply Side, Natural Products Insider, and Food and Beverage Insider. I'm the Content Marketing Director, and I'm happy to be your host for this morning. And today, we'll be talking about chocolate. Everybody, well, I don't know that everybody loves chocolate, but I know that I love chocolate. And having fine chocolate is no easy task. It's not one recipe or one formulation for one thing that we call chocolate. So we're going to learn a little bit today about producing chocolate that not only tastes amazing but feels amazing in your mouth. So sweet innovations, chocolate confections, and more. And we'll be hearing first from Dr. Linson Liu with Guittard Chocolates. After his presentation, we'll do a little Q&A, and I'll open that up if you have questions as well. So with that, and without further ado, I hand it over to Linson.
Okay, good morning. My name is Linson Liu. I came from Guittard Chocolate. So today we'll talk about chocolate. So chocolate is basically cocoa butter based. In the US, the chocolate is you have to use 100% cocoa butter. In the EU, it's slightly different. You allow use 5% CBE. We'll talk about a little bit CBE later. And a compound coating is typically made with vegetable fat. There's majorly 3 different type of vegetable fat. We'll get into a little bit detail after this. Now, first let's look at the cocoa butter. Cocoa butter, based on the region, the functionality and property changes slightly. So from this is the more like solid fat content at each temperature. You can see the Asian cocoa butter slightly be more solid at a different temperature, and followed by Africa bean and then South American bean. So keep in mind that the different region cocoa butter, they can be a little bit harder, a little bit softer. Now let's look at the vegetable fat. Vegetable fat, those is allowed to make a chocolate similar product. And majorly, there's 3 types of them. The first one is called CBE. The CBE is made majorly, we call equivalent. The reason we call that equivalent because the CBE is in composition, they are simulating the cocoa butter. So that's why they function very similarly. They have a similar composition. You can get the CBE by 2 ways. Naturally, shea butter, very similar to the cocoa butter in composition. Therefore, you process the shea butter, and then you can use to replace some of the cocoa butter. And also, you can use the enzyme intensification to get the same functionality. Next category is we call the substitute. Substitute is not a composition similarity. It's actually a physical property. So which means this fat is based on the palm kernel oil, and this fat is actually melting similarly as the cocoa butter, but composition-wise, completely different. So now you have the equivalent is the composition similar, and therefore you can replace the cocoa butter. And then you have the CBS, that's the physical similarity, so you can replace the cocoa butter. The last one is cocoa butter we call replacer. The replacer actually is, was used very widely. It's based on trans fat, but trans fat was banned in the US and European. So only a few countries in the world are still using it. Now, let's look at from bean to chocolate, how the basic process to make the chocolate from the bean, right? So the first one is you need to select which kind of bean, so pretty much which kind of tree, because there's a different origin tree. That's the determining factor what flavor you can get. And with that, you harvest the pod from the tree, and then you fermentate it. So this fermentation is the first very important step after you select which kind of bean you want, right? So the fermentation actually is produce the flavor precursor, and this is the step is very important. Without this step, the chocolate tastes a lot of notes. So you don't have this very pleasant chocolate taste. After the fermentation, you basically dry the bean, and that's where you can sell the bean on the market. And we, as the chocolate maker, we buy the bean from the market, and then we started process the cocoa. So this one we'll talk about is how from the bean how we process the cocoa, right? So with the bean, the first one you get the bean, and the first thing you do is clean it, and after that you roast it. Right? Roast is the most important step in developing chocolate flavor. That's converting the precursor. Remember, we mentioned that the precursor is in the fermentation. You produce this flavor precursor. Roasting is actually the step you convert this precursor into a final chocolate taste flavor. After that, you can break down the bean and remove the shell, right? The kernel will become small pieces that we call nib in the industry. And then you take the nib, you grind it, and pretty much like you grind the peanuts. Now you get a paste. The paste that we call the chocolate liquor. So this is actually you can call that chocolate too, but that's mostly used as the ingredient to make the chocolate. And you put this liquor into a press, you can remove the cocoa butter. And after remove the cocoa butter, and what's left is called cocoa cake. And you grind the cocoa cake, you get the cocoa powder, right? So that's how the cocoa powder produced. And of course, you get the cocoa butter on the side. So this is how the cocoa product was produced. And from here, you can sell the finished product, and you can make the chocolate, right? So now let's look at how do we make the chocolate. And when you have the chocolate, the first thing you use the liquor, blend with other ingredient. If you want to make a dark chocolate, you blend with sugar, and then you process it. If you want to make a milk chocolate, and you add the milk into it, right? So you blend it, and then that's going to process and make a chocolate. Now you notice that the coarse, like sugar and the milk particle size are very coarse. So the first thing after you mixing this together is the particle size reduction. What we do is in the industry we call refining. So refining is accomplished by let the chocolate go through the 5 rows. So between the 2 rows, you basically crush the particle size. So you reduce the particle size. And so that's through the 5 rows, you basically drop the particle size from 150 to 200 micron into below 20 micron. If you're above 20 micron, typically you can taste it. Your tongue can detect the particle size. So that gives you a grittiness, right? So to quality control, you use the 5-row refiner to do a particle size reduction, right? And also you notice that after this particle size reduction, the product from the liquid become a solid, right? So the reason they become a solid is when the sugar particle size becomes smaller, they turn around and entrap the fat cocoa butter inside. So it becomes a solid. So after that, next step is the conch. The conching is serves 2 purposes. One is you need to release the cocoa butter back to the system. So you make a solid suspended into the cocoa butter, so they become a liquid again, right? Second purpose is when you fermentation, roasting, you generate a lot of those pleasant chocolate flavor, but you still have a lot of those off notes carry over from the cocoa beans. So in this process, you under the heating, stirring condition, with the time going on, you allow those to become volatile to get out. So you only retain those pleasant chocolate flavor, and get rid of those off notes, right? So after that, your chocolate become more smooth, less astringent. That's the purpose. And in the meantime, you suspend the chocolate and make this step we call the liquid chocolate. Now, after we made the liquid chocolate, next step is basically you convert the liquid chocolate into the solid chocolate, right? You can achieve this by depositing, molding, and enrobing, right? After this liquid deposited on this different shape, you let this product go through the cooling tunnel, and then eventually you solidify the chocolate into the shape. So that's how you finish all the chocolate manufactured. So how you select the chocolate for different application, right? So the first thing is you need to understand that the chocolate is a standard identity product. So there's a regulatory requirement. Second one is that you need to understand what your consumer prefer is. And the third one is you need to choose what chocolate characteristics you wanted. Majorly it's viscosity, right? So for enrobing ice cream coating, for example, you have to choose the low viscosity. And for the baking, like cookie baking, you need to choose the high viscosity. Because if you use the cookie chocolate for the ice cream coating, you cannot get a very smooth, thin layer coating on the product. If you use the ice cream coating chocolate in the baking, and the chocolate going to melt it, completely melted, ruin your cookie, right? So you need those thicker, high viscosity chocolate. So go through the baking, they still keep their shape. So this is the majorly based on your application. That's a consideration for you how to choose the chocolate. That's all for what I will talk about today. So I will answer any question we have in the audience.
So before we get to the audience questions, and I will ask you to formulate questions, no pun intended there, I do have a few questions for you,
Okay.
Linson. And you know, when I look at the story of chocolate, and I've been to cacao plantations, I've seen the whole process, it boggles my mind that human beings have figured this out. You know, what's inside that pod bears little relationship to the confection that we consume. And this is a little bit of an off-handed question, but how do you think that people discovered or, you know, problem solved to get to this incredible chocolate experience that we have from these raw beans? How do you think that ever happened?
Well, that's like 200, 300 years evolution, right? So the Native American, they started using this and as the beverage and also used as food. Now, when the Spanish come into the continental, they found those beans. So gradually they moved this to the Africa to a plantation, and then this spread into Europe, and then over the almost 200 years, people gradually find a different way to optimize the flavor, continuous improvement. So that's what we have today is the chocolate. For example, conching, that's just invented, it's roughly less than 100 years ago, right? It's not original.
That's amazing, really. So the promise seemed to be there, and we followed the promise. So I have a few technical questions I'd like to ask you. So how does the type of fat that's used in the chocolate, because you did talk about different fats today, how does that differ in function and mouthfeel with varied cacao percentages, right? Because consumers are looking for a different percentage of cacao in what they're consuming, and that fat balance affects the way that their sensorial experiences. How does that vary that way with the type of fat?
So the cocoa butter gives the mouthfeel, right? So cocoa butter is this is really the nature's given, right? Can you use for example, can you eat the tallow lard? No, you can't, right? So tallow lard, they don't melt completely in your mouth. That's why you feel, if you eat the tallow and lard, you feel very waxy in your mouth. And you can't use the liquid oil like soybean, right? You eat a soybean, for example, there's nothing to melt. So in your mouth, you feel oily. But the cocoa butter is just the perfect. They melted, they have very high solid. So in the room temperature, you can snap it. It behavior like solid. Once you put it in the mouth at your body temperature, they completely melted it at 35 degrees, right? So that's give you the sensation. The fat melting sensation give you the pleasure of the chocolate.
So it's all about that melting point.
It's a melting, yeah.
Yeah. And you brought up tallow, and nobody eats chocolate confections with tallow. But there are many consumers that are leaning into plant-based and plant-forward and centric consuming habits, and also enjoy the mouthfeel of milk chocolate and the flavor of milk chocolate, but they want to avoid dairy milk. So what kinds of substitutes might work well for dairy milk for those that are wanting more plant-based claims on their products?
Yeah. So milk fat is very functional in the chocolate, right? So milk fat basically is bring two basic function, right? One is dairy flavor. You can't get any dairy flavor from any other fat, right? That's just another nature-given dairy. Second one is milk fat is compatible with cocoa butter. If you use other fat, they are not compatible. They're going to cause your chocolate bloom. Now, with the milk fat, the compatibility is roughly about 5%. So you cannot go too high with that, right? So with that 5%, you bring the flavor, and also you make the chocolate slightly softer, so that gives you the smoothness. So that's why the milk chocolate tastes different from the dark chocolate, right? Dark chocolate, you can taste the bitterness, and the milk chocolate is milky, creamy, and smoothness, right? So it's different.
So what I hear you saying is that there really isn't a great substitute for dairy milk if you want that delicious feel in your mouth and that flavor.
No, not in the chocolate industry. In the other industry, for example, the baking, you can substitute the butter with shortening, with margarine, right? That can be done. But in the chocolate industry, there's no such substitute.
All right, stick with dark chocolate if you don't want to drink, eat milk. Let's take an audience question, and we're going to give you a mic so we can hear you.
Thanks so much for the talk. What's the difference between cacao powder, cocoa powder, and Dutch processed cocoa powder?
Those is processed differently. So like a Dutch, typically you cook the cocoa with alkali. So it's also called alkali cocoa powder. With the pH, when you add the alkali into the cocoa process, the pH going up, right? So when the pH up, you're going to trigger different reaction. That reaction produces a different flavor. So like Oreo, right? Oreo uses the Dutch cocoa powder. It just gives you a different alkali flavors. So if you want a strong flavor, you need to choose the Dutch cocoa powder. Yeah. What's that?
Cacao powder, what's the difference between, is that just less refined than cocoa? Cacao powder?
Cacao powder, I consider cacao powder is basically the cocoa powder. Is anything different? It's the same standard identity. People probably marketing use a different name. And to me, the cocoa powder is you basically came out this. That's also called cacao, right? So cacao powder. And then when you use the alkaline reaction, by standard identity, you have to call that a Dutch or alkali.
Well, would the cacao powder versus cocoa powder that most consumers are identifying vary by mesh size, perhaps, by
Fat
the
content.
granularization at all?
I don't see that.
No difference?
It's just probably it's a tomato.
Tomato,
People
tomato.
pronounce differently.
Chocolate?
Maybe, yeah.
Hello. Okay. Thanks for your talk. My question is somewhat similar on the level of processing. I'm just wondering if you're seeing patterns with consumer preferences. Are we headed towards more highly refined milk chocolate with a lot of sugar and dairy? Or are we headed towards darker chocolates, less sugar, maybe cacao nibs put in there? Like, there's kind of a long spectrum.
Yeah.
Which way do you think we're headed with the
Yeah.
consumer desire?
Well, that's very interesting. So traditionally, we are basically the dark chocolate, semi-sweet, and milk chocolate, right? That's the major backbone. And in recent years, there's more extension on that, right? Some of the consumer start moving into higher cacao, right? So they drive the cacao to higher, higher, and higher. So they single origin, for example, and no sugar added. So you use the sugar substitute. Those are the new trending for the consumer for wellness standpoint. So that's definitely is trending. And recently, it's for example, no dairy, right? So we are working. Guitar just launched a no dairy chocolate line. So that's another trending going on.
Yeah, there may be, obviously it's market to market as well too. We're mostly talking the U.S. market here, North American market. There may be trending shifts generationally. Actually, we'll be talking about that, not specifically about chocolate, but in another hour. So younger consumers are focusing and leaning into plant-based, but they're also leaning into health adjacent attributes in what they're consuming with chocolate that way too. So I think that might be reflected generationally that way. Yeah. Another audience question.
Is chocolate a little bit like wine, where different weather conditions and other circumstances year to year greatly affect flavor?
Majorly, I think there's a similarity there, definitely. The majorly is by the origin, type of the genetics, and the way how you process it. Right? So that's the major determination. It's not a sensitive like a grape, because that's basically the temperature, moisture. They're going to impact it this year. Crop, there's a lot of variation over the years because those are the climate change, right? But the cocoa is more relative, depend on the genetics and how you process it. More there's a similarity, also independence difference. Yeah.
So not quite as sensitive as terroir in grapes, but maybe more like coffee bean.
Yeah, more coffee bean.
Yeah, in terms of the genetics and
absolutely.
specifics in that environment in that
right.
way. I have some other questions, but I do want to keep it open to the audience.
I just had one, and I appreciated your talking about enrobing versus baking and having the viscosity. Do you have any other suggestions about percentage of cacao for baking, like, higher?
Or louder, I can hear you.
Percentages of, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Percentages of cacao for baking. What are the benefits of a higher level versus lower? Is it a preference for taste, or is there a performance issue?
Yeah, you can do either way. It's a low and like a milk chocolate, right? Typically, it's a lower cacao percent. You can use that perfectly. And for the dark chocolate, it's higher cacao. It's all depend on your flavor preference, because chocolate is majorly is for the flavor, right? So that's really the matter. What flavor you like. There's the high cacao, low cacao. They all can for the same purpose. The major is that you control the liquid and the solid ratio, which means the cocoa butter and the cocoa mass ratio, right? So if you control, if you have a higher solid ratio over the cocoa butter, you will have a higher viscosity. That's how you manage that. If you want to reduce the viscosity, just add more cocoa butter, and then they become more smooth and more liquid.
Hi, Dr. Liu. What techniques or special functional ingredients can be used to produce unique shapes, like for custom chocolate pieces? I saw a picture of a blue mold being used.
Yeah. So the major one is, number one, you need to watch your formula. You need to make sure your viscosity is correct, right? For those different deposit conditions, they require different viscosity. So for example, you molding it, right? Molding, you need a little bit lower viscosity. When you deposit on the stainless billet, you need a little bit higher viscosity. Otherwise, they cannot hold themselves. Once you deposit on the billet, they start spread, right? They cannot keep their shape. In the mold, when the viscosity is too high, they cannot spread into the corners. So you need a little bit lower viscosity. So that's the first one. You need to monitor your formula, make sure your viscosity is correct. Second one, you need to monitor your tempering. You need to temper the chocolate correctly. If you over-temper it, it becomes so viscous. And when you drop it into the mold, they don't spread, right? So when you do the enrobing, for example, you have your candy center in the middle. The chocolate won't overflow smoothly. And then you end up with a problem. Either too thick or too thin, they're going to cause a problem. So you have to temper the chocolate correctly. So that's the second part. So formulation, tempering, and also there's a mechanical side, right? So for example, you go through after you're enrobing, you need to shake the chocolate correctly. Chocolate is a non-Newtonian fluid, right? When they stop, if you don't give it a share, they're going to stop, and then they're going to solidify as a shape. When you give a share, shake it, they start flowing, so they can give you a smooth coating on the side, right? So those kind of mechanical. So you have a formulation, processing, and a mechanical combination to make your perfect product.
So
Yeah.
I'm being mindful of time here. Do we have any other audience questions? So I just want to ask you about working. It's actually a segue from that question. So, for brands that are really trying to achieve something very specifically, and Guittard is a generational chocolatier. The company specializes in chocolate, privately held company. There's many other companies people can work with. I'm not trying to promote Guittard, but I just want to ask, do you work with the brand to help achieve what they're after? Because there's, it's not all chocolates are created equal. There are all these technical aspects that you have to account for when you want to get to that end product. So do you partner with companies to produce those?
We do. So chocolate is, as you're aware, chocolate is like a wine, right? So you have a very cheap wine, you have very good, elegant wine. Chocolate is the same thing. So you have a commodity chocolate, you have a fine chocolate. So Guittard is a 5-generation family-owned business. So we are specialized in the fine chocolate, right? Fine chocolate is tasted differently because majorly the cocoa bean, there's majorly 3 regions, right? You have Africa is a major producer, a typical commodity cocoa. In South America, Central America, they call fine cocoa place. That the bean from the South and Central America tastes differently. It tastes better, give you a fruity beside the chocolate. And Asia is more different. So the majorly for fine chocolate, we use the South Central America. We basically use American bean, more American bean in the blend. That gives you your unique taste, right? So that's how different between the bean from a different region. Now, when we produce the fine chocolate, not only you pick up the right bean, right, and also how you roast it. The roast is at a different temperature, gives a different flavor too, and they determine how that taste is. And particle size reduction, right? So commodity chocolate, typically they have a little bit of coarse, they typically around 30 micron, and it's not smooth as anything below 20 micron, right? So if you can get a chocolate around 15 micron, the chocolate tastes really smoothie, right? But if you have the 30 micron chocolate, you taste you can taste the grittiness, right? Now that's if you buy the fine chocolate, you buy the commodity chocolate, right? You just taste them side by side. it pretty much like you have a two bottle wine, right? One is maybe very cheap wine, another is a fine, elegant wine. It just tastes different. Once you taste the fine chocolate, you never go back with the commodity chocolate. That's what I did, right? Before I work at guitar, I always buy the brand chocolate. And after I taste the guitar chocolate, I never taste that brand chocolate anymore. It just it basically very bland. The brand chocolate is actually to me is very bland, tasteless now. So.
And the wrong texture. I think you're preaching to the converted here. Yeah, I'm with you. Get the right chocolate, get the best chocolate. We are out of time for this session. I thank you so much, Dr. Liu. This was really a nice, quick little education. I'm sure you can seek Linton Liu for some additional questions that you may have. We appreciate you coming here at the beginning of Supply Side West all the way over here. Thank you so much.